During my wedding reception, I got a text. Check your husband's phone, now. I wish I hadn't. What I discovered that night didn't just end my marriage, it exposed a web of lies that had been carefully constructed for months. My name is Natalie, and this is the story of how the happiest day of my life became the day I learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have known something was wrong when Marcus started working late every Tuesday. Not Monday, not Wednesday, but specifically Tuesday, like clockwork. He'd come home with that tired smile, kiss my forehead, and apologize for missing dinner again. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because we were 3 weeks away from our wedding, and because Marcus had never given me a reason not to trust him. We'd been together for 4 years, living together for 2. He proposed on the beach in Santa Barbara last September, right as the sun was setting behind the pier. It was perfect, just like everything else about our relationship had been. Marcus was the kind of man who remembered to buy milk before we ran out, who left little notes in my lunch bag, who held my hand during scary movies, even though he was more frightened than I was. My friends used to joke that I'd won the boyfriend lottery. Jessica would roll her eyes whenever Marcus would text to make sure I got home safely from girls' night. "You realize most guys don't do that, right?" she'd say, but she was smiling when she said it. Even my mother, who had something critical to say about every man I'd ever dated, would light up whenever Marcus was around. "That one's a keeper," she'd whispered to me while he was helping my dad fix the back gate. The wedding planning had been a dream. Marcus was involved in every decision, from the flowers, to the music, to the guest list. While my friends complained about their boyfriends who couldn't care less about centerpieces, Marcus was sending me Pinterest boards and asking thoughtful questions about whether we wanted a band or a DJ. He even suggested we do a first-look session before the ceremony because he'd read that it helps calm pre-wedding nerves. Looking back, I wonder if his enthusiasm was genuine or if it was overcompensation. If somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew he was living a lie and was trying to make up for it by being the perfect fiancé. But at the time, it just felt like love. Pure, uncomplicated love. The morning of our wedding was everything I'd dreamed it would be. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by my bridesmaids. My sister Emma had surprised me with coffee from my favorite cafe, and my maid of honor, Sarah, had brought fresh flowers to put in my hair. The sunlight was streaming through the lace curtains, and everything felt golden and magical. Marcus and I had decided to exchange texts instead of seeing each other before the ceremony. Mine read, "In 6 hours, I get to marry my best friend. I can't wait to spend forever with you." His response came immediately. "You're going to take my breath away. I love you more than words can say. See you at the altar, future Mrs. Coleman." The ceremony was perfect. Marcus cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, just like he'd predicted he would. My father's hand was shaking when he placed it in Marcus's, and I could see tears in his eyes, too. The vows we'd written ourselves were everything we'd hoped they'd be. Funny, heartfelt, and deeply personal. When the officiant pronounced as husband and wife, Marcus kissed me like it was the first time and the last time all at once. The reception was at the Riverside Gardens, this beautiful venue with string lights hanging from oak trees and a dance floor that looked out over the water. Everything was exactly as we had planned it. The food was incredible, the music was perfect, and our photographer was capturing every moment. My dress was everything I'd hoped it would be, flowing and romantic without being too princessy. Marcus looked devastating in his navy suit, and I caught myself staring at him across the room more than once thinking, "That's my husband." We'd been married for exactly 3 hours and 27 minutes when my phone buzzed during the father-daughter dance. I almost ignored it. This was my wedding day, after all, and I was in the middle of a sweet moment with my dad, swaying to "The Way You Look Tonight," while Marcus was watching from her sweetheart table with the biggest smile on his face. But something made me glance down at the screen. Maybe it was the persistence of it, 3 quick buzzes in a row. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was just bad timing. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, but the words made my blood freeze. "Check your husband's phone, now. You deserve to know the truth. This is from someone who cares about you." My first instinct was to delete it. Clearly, this was some kind of mistake or cruel joke. Someone probably sent it to the wrong number. Marcus was right there, beaming at me as I danced with my dad, looking like the happiest man alive. The idea that he could be hiding something on our wedding day of all days seemed impossible. But the message had said husband, not fiancé. Whoever sent it knew we had just gotten married. They knew enough to find my number and time their message for maximum impact. And something about the tone, the urgency, the claim to care about me, felt genuine in a way that made my stomach turn. The song ended, and my father kissed my cheek. "You look radiant, sweetheart," he said. "Marcus is a lucky man." I smiled and thanked him, but my mind was racing. I walked back to our table where Marcus was chatting with his groomsmen, his phone face down beside his champagne glass. "Hey, beautiful," he said when he saw me approaching. "How was dancing with your dad?" I forced a smile and said it was perfect, but I couldn't stop staring at his phone. It was in a navy case that matched his suit, which I always thought was a cute detail. Now it looked ominous, like it was hiding something dark. I excused myself to the bathroom, telling Marcus I needed to touch up my lipstick. In the mirror, I looked like a bride who was having the time of her life. My makeup was still perfect, my hair was still elegant, and my smile looked genuine. But my hands were shaking, and I could see the fear in my eyes that I was trying so hard to hide. I stared at the anonymous message again, reading it over and over. "Check your husband's phone. Now. You deserve to know the truth. This is from someone who cares about you." The words felt heavier each time I read them. Who would send something like this? Why now? And why were they so certain I needed to know whatever truth they were referring to? When I came back to the table, Marcus was talking to my cousin about honeymoon plans. 2 weeks in Italy, he was saying. Natalie's never been to Europe, so I wanted to make it special. He looked up at me with such genuine affection that I almost convinced myself the text was just some sick joke. But then, his phone lit up with a notification, just for a second, but long enough for me to see a name flash across the screen. Veronica. I didn't know any Veronica. Marcus had never mentioned a Veronica. And yet, at 9:30 on our wedding night, she was texting my husband.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
That name, Veronica, echoed in my head as I sat back down beside Marcus. He was laughing at something my uncle had said, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. His phone was still face down on the table, but I could feel it there like a live wire, dangerous and electric. I tried to focus on the conversation around me, tried to smile and nod at the appropriate moments, but every fiber of my being was focused on that device. Marcus excused himself to greet some late-arriving guests from his work, and the moment he was out of sight, I found myself staring at his phone again. The smart thing would have been to confront him directly, to ask who Veronica was and why she was texting him on our wedding night. But something deeper, some instinct I'd learned to trust over the years, told me that if I asked, I wouldn't get the truth. I glanced around the reception. Everyone was mingling, dancing, celebrating. The band was playing something upbeat, and I could see my grandmother attempting to teach Marcus's nephew some kind of old-fashioned dance step. It was the picture of joy, exactly what we'd hoped our wedding would be. And here I was, sitting in the middle of it all, contemplating whether to invade my husband's privacy based on an anonymous text from a stranger. But then I remembered something that had been nagging at me for weeks. Last month, Marcus had started putting his phone face down during dinner. He said it was because he was trying to be more present, more focused on our time together. I'd thought it was sweet, another example of how thoughtful he was. Now I wondered if it was because he didn't want me to see the notifications coming in. There had been other small things too, things I'd dismissed at the time. The way he'd started taking his phone to the bathroom with him, how he'd become protective of his laptop, closing it quickly whenever I walked by. The fact that he'd stopped leaving his devices around the apartment casually, the way he used to. At the time, I'd attributed it to work stress or wedding planning anxiety. Now those memories felt different, tainted with suspicion. Marcus returned to the table, and I watched him carefully as he picked up his phone to check it. His expression didn't change, but I noticed how quickly he glanced at the screen and how immediately he turned it face down again. When he looked up at me, his smile was the same warm, loving expression I'd fallen for 4 years ago. But for the first time, I found myself questioning whether it was genuine. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, reaching for my hand. "You seem a little distracted." I forced a laugh. "Just taking it all in," I said. "I can't believe we're actually married." He squeezed my hand and brought it to his lips. "Mrs. Coleman," he said softly. I loved the sound of that. 6 hours ago, hearing him say that would have made my heart flutter. Now it felt like a performance, and I hated myself for thinking that way. This was my wedding day, the day I'd been planning for months, the day I dreamed about since I was a little girl. I should have been floating on cloud nine, not sitting here wondering if my new husband was lying to me. The evening continued around us. We cut the cake, and Marcus playfully smeared frosting on my nose, just like we'd planned. We had our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and he whispered sweet things in my ear that made our guests smile and take pictures. To everyone watching, we were the perfect couple having the perfect wedding. But I felt like I was watching it all from outside myself, like I was an actress playing the role of a happy bride. During the bouquet toss, I stood with all the single women, laughing and pretending to try to catch the flowers. My cousin Angela caught them instead, and everyone cheered and teased her about her boyfriend finally proposing. I hugged her and smiled, but all I could think about was Marcus's phone and the mysterious Veronica, and whether my marriage had already ended before it had truly begun. As the night wore on, I found myself studying Marcus in a way I never had before. I watched how he interacted with his friends, looking for signs of guilt or nervousness. I listened to his conversations, waiting for him to slip up and mention someone he shouldn't. I analyzed every expression, every gesture, every word, searching for cracks in what had always seemed like an open book. But Marcus was the same as he had always been. Charming with my relatives, funny with his college friends, affectionate with me. He danced with my mother and made her laugh. He gave a heartfelt speech about how lucky he felt to be joining our family. He was attentive and loving and everything a new husband should be. If he was hiding something, he was doing an incredible job of it. The anonymous text sender remained silent for the rest of the evening, but their words had planted a seed of doubt that grew stronger with each passing hour. By the time we were saying goodbye to our last guests, I felt like I was living in two parallel universes. In one, I was a blissfully happy newlywed, ending the most perfect day of her life. In the other, I was a woman on the verge of discovering that everything she believed about her relationship was a lie. We went back to our apartment instead of staying at the hotel we'd originally planned. Marcus said he wanted to wake up in our own bed as husband and wife, which had seemed romantic when he suggested it weeks earlier. Now I wondered if he had other reasons for wanting to be somewhere private, somewhere he could access his computer and his charger and whatever other digital secrets he might be keeping. I went through the motions of hanging up my dress and removing my makeup, but my mind was elsewhere. Marcus was in the bathroom, and I could hear him brushing his teeth and going through his normal bedtime routine. His phone was on the nightstand, charging, just within reach. All I had to do was pick it up. All I had to do was look. But I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. Not yet. Because once I opened that door, there would be no going back. If the anonymous text gender was wrong, if there was some innocent explanation for everything, I would have violated Marcus's trust for nothing. And if they were right, if there really was something to find, then everything I thought I knew about my life would change in an instant. Marcus came out of the bathroom and smiled when he saw me sitting on the edge of the bed in my pajamas. He said, "There's my beautiful wife. How are you feeling? Happy? Tired? Overwhelmed?" All of the above, I thought. But I just smiled and said, "Perfect. Today was perfect." He squeezed my hand and brought it to his lips. "Mrs. Coleman," he said softly. I loved the sound of that. 6 hours ago, hearing him say that would have made my heart flutter. Now it felt like a performance, and I hated myself for thinking that way. This was my wedding day, the day I'd been planning for months, the day I dreamed about since I was a little girl. I should have been floating on cloud nine, not sitting here wondering if my new husband was lying to me. The evening continued around us. We cut the cake, and Marcus playfully smeared frosting on my nose, just like we'd planned. We had our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and he whispered sweet things in my ear that made our guests smile and take pictures. To everyone watching, we were the perfect couple having the perfect wedding. But I felt like I was watching it all from outside myself, like I was an actress playing the role of a happy bride. During the bouquet toss, I stood with all the single women, laughing and pretending to try to catch the flowers. My cousin Angela caught them instead, and everyone cheered and teased her about her boyfriend finally proposing. I hugged her and smiled, but all I could think about was Marcus's phone and the mysterious Veronica, and whether my marriage had already ended before it had truly begun. As the night wore on, I found myself studying Marcus in a way I never had before. I watched how he interacted with his friends, looking for signs of guilt or nervousness. I listened to his conversations, waiting for him to slip up and mention someone he shouldn't. I analyzed every expression, every gesture, every word, searching for cracks in what had always seemed like an open book. But Marcus was the same as he had always been. Charming with my relatives, funny with his college friends, affectionate with me. He danced with my mother and made her laugh. He gave a heartfelt speech about how lucky he felt to be joining our family. He was attentive and loving and everything a new husband should be. If he was hiding something, he was doing an incredible job of it. The anonymous text sender remained silent for the rest of the evening, but their words had planted a seed of doubt that grew stronger with each passing hour. By the time we were saying goodbye to our last guests, I felt like I was living in two parallel universes. In one, I was a blissfully happy newlywed, ending the most perfect day of her life. In the other, I was a woman on the verge of discovering that everything she believed about her relationship was a lie. We went back to our apartment instead of staying at the hotel we'd originally planned. Marcus said he wanted to wake up in our own bed as husband and wife, which had seemed romantic when he suggested it weeks earlier. Now I wondered if he had other reasons for wanting to be somewhere private, somewhere he could access his computer and his charger and whatever other digital secrets he might be keeping. I went through the motions of hanging up my dress and removing my makeup, but my mind was elsewhere. Marcus was in the bathroom, and I could hear him brushing his teeth and going through his normal bedtime routine. His phone was on the nightstand, charging, just within reach. All I had to do was pick it up. All I had to do was look. But I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. Not yet. Because once I looked, once I opened that door, there would be no going back. If the anonymous text sender was wrong, if there was some innocent explanation for everything, I would have violated Marcus's trust for nothing. And if they were right, if there really was something to find, then everything I thought I knew about my life would change in an instant. Marcus came out of the bathroom and smiled when he saw me sitting on the edge of the bed in my pajamas. He said, "There's my beautiful wife. How are you feeling? Happy? Tired? Overwhelmed?" All of the above, but I just smiled and said, "Perfect. Today."
My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the conversation thread. What I saw there made my world collapse in real time. The messages weren't just from tonight. They went back months. Intimate messages, photos I couldn't bear to look at for more than a second, conversations about hotels and secret meetings and how much they missed each other. But it was the timestamps that truly broke me. Messages sent while I was at work, while I was planning our wedding, while I was lying in bed next to him. There was even one sent last Tuesday during one of those late work nights I'd believed in so completely. "I can't wait until this wedding charade is over," read one message from 3 weeks ago. "Then we can finally be together properly." Another from Veronica sent just yesterday. "Are you really going through with it? It feels so cruel to her." Marcus's response, "It's complicated. After the honeymoon, I'll figure out how to tell her. I just need more time." I scrolled through months of deception, watching my relationship disintegrate in real time through stolen moments and hidden conversations. There were references to places they'd been together, restaurants I'd suggested to Marcus that he'd claimed not to like, photos taken in locations I recognized, places he'd told me he was going for work meetings.
The most devastating part wasn't even the affair itself. It was reading how he talked about me, about our relationship, about our wedding. To him, I was an obligation, a problem to be solved. Our marriage was a charade, something to be endured until he could find the courage to leave me for someone else. There was a message from just 4 hours ago, sent while I was dancing with my father. The ceremony was beautiful, Veronica had written. She looked so happy, I feel terrible. Marcus had replied, "Don't. This isn't your fault. I should have handled this better, but it's too late now. I'll call you tomorrow after she goes to work." I sat there in the dark, reading and rereading these messages, trying to make sense of how the man sleeping peacefully beside me could be the same person who had written these words. The Marcus in these texts was a stranger, cold and calculating, and nothing like the loving fiancé who had cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. My wedding dress was hanging in the closet just a few feet away, still perfect and pristine, waiting to be preserved in a special box as a keepsake. 12 hours ago, I had been the happiest woman alive, floating down that aisle toward what I thought was my future. Now I was sitting in my pajamas, holding evidence that my entire relationship had been built on lies. I wanted to wake him up immediately, to scream and throw the phone at his head and demand explanations, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the realization that there was nothing he could say that would make this better. The messages were clear, the timeline was undeniable, and the cruelty of letting me plan and pay for a wedding to a man who was in love with someone else was unforgivable. Instead, I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every cruel comment about our relationship. I sent them all to my own phone, creating a digital record of his betrayal. Then I carefully placed his phone back on the nightstand and laid down beside him, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do next. Marcus stirred in his sleep and unconsciously pulled me closer, his arm tightening around my waist. The gesture that had always made me feel safe and loved now felt like a prison. I wanted to push him away, to run from the bed and never come back, but I forced myself to lie still and think. The logical part of my brain was already making lists. I needed to call my sister, needed to figure out how to tell our families, needed to think about the apartment lease and the joint bank account and all the practical details of untangling a life we'd built together. But the emotional part of me was still catching up, still processing the magnitude of what I'd discovered. When morning came, Marcus woke up with the same loving smile he had every day for 4 years. He kissed my shoulder and stretched, looking perfectly content and guilt-free. "Good morning, Mrs. Coleman. How did you sleep?" I looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign of the person I'd read about in those messages. But he looked exactly the same. Same dark hair sticking up in the back, same brown eyes, same easy smile. It was terrifying how normal he seemed, how completely he could compartmentalize his double life. "Fine," I managed to say. "You?" "Like a baby," he said, sitting up and reaching for his phone. I watched his face carefully as he checked his messages, but his expression didn't change at all. He was either an incredible actor or completely without conscience. He got up to make coffee, humming under his breath, and I followed him to the kitchen. We went through the motions of a normal morning, discussing our plans for the day, whether we should start packing for our honeymoon trip. He was exactly the same as he'd always been, affectionate and attentive and seemingly devoted. But I kept thinking about those messages, about how easily he'd lied to both me and Veronica, how effortlessly he'd maintained 2 separate relationships. I wondered how long this had been going on, whether there had been others before her, whether anything about our relationship had ever been real. "You seem quiet this morning," Marcus said, handing me a cup of coffee made exactly the way I liked it. "Wedding hangover?" I almost laughed at the irony. A wedding hangover is exactly what this was, just not the kind he meant. "Just tired," I said. "It was a long day." He nodded and kissed my forehead. "Why don't you take it easy today? I have some errands to run anyway." Errands. I wondered if Veronica was on that list, if he was planning to see her while I stayed home recovering from our wedding. The casual way he suggested it, like it was just a normal Tuesday, made me realize that this was probably how it had always been. Him living his secret life, while I waited at home, trusting and oblivious. After he left, I sat alone in our apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts that needed to be opened and thank you cards that needed to be written. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was supposed to be basking in newlywed bliss, opening presents and reliving the magic of our perfect day. Instead, I was planning how to blow up my life. I called my sister first. Emma answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "How's married life treating you, Mrs. Coleman?" That name, the name I'd been so excited to take just 24 hours ago, now felt like a cruel joke. "Emma," I said, and something in my voice must have given me away because her tone immediately changed. "Nat, what's wrong? Are you okay?" I told her everything about the anonymous text, about finding the messages, about the months of lies and deception. She listened in stunned silence, occasionally making small shocked sounds, but mostly just letting me talk. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm coming over right now." "You don't have to do that," I started to say, but she cut me off. "Yes, I do. You shouldn't be alone right now."
"I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, Emma arrived with coffee, pastries, and the kind of fierce protective energy that only sisters possess. She hugged me for a long time without saying anything, and when she finally pulled back, her eyes were blazing with anger. "What do you want to do?" she asked simply. That question hung in the air between us. What did I want to do? Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen those messages, to go on our honeymoon and hope that Marcus would end things with Veronica and choose me. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him scramble to explain away. But mostly, I wanted my life back. I wanted to go back to yesterday morning when I was still blissfully ignorant, when I still believed in the man I'd married. Since that wasn't possible, I wanted the next best thing. I wanted to take control of my own story. "I want him gone," I said finally. "I want him out of my life completely." Emma nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." When Marcus came home that evening, I was waiting for him with his suitcases packed and sitting by the door. He stopped short when he saw them, confusion written all over his face. "What's going on?" he asked. "Are we leaving for the honeymoon early?" I held up his phone, open to the conversation with Veronica. "Those aren't honeymoon bags," I said quietly. The color drained from his face, and for the first time since I'd known him, Marcus Coleman was completely speechless. He stared at the phone, then at me, then at the suitcases, and I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out how to explain away the unexplainable. "Natalie," he started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. "Just don't. There's nothing you can say that will make this better." He tried anyway, of course. There were tears, apologies, promises that it meant nothing, that Veronica was just a mistake, that he loved me and only me. But I'd read those messages. I knew how he really felt about our marriage, about me, about the life we'd supposedly built together. The hardest part wasn't his attempts to explain or his tears when he realized I wasn't going to forgive him. The hardest part was how quickly he gave up. After about an hour of half-hearted pleading, he just stopped trying. He picked up his suitcases, looked around our apartment one last time, and walked out the door. That was 6 months ago. The divorce was finalized last month, exactly 1 year to the day after Marcus proposed on that beach in Santa Barbara. I kept my maiden name and lost a husband, but I gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved better than someone who could lie to me so easily for so long. I never did find out who sent me that anonymous text. Sometimes I wonder if it was Veronica, if guilt finally got the better of her. Sometimes I think it might have been someone from Marcus's work who knew about the affair. But mostly, I'm just grateful. Grateful that someone cared enough to tell me the truth, even when it was the last thing I wanted to hear. Marcus and Veronica are together now, officially. I saw their relationship status update on social media before I blocked them both. Part of me wonders if they'll make it, if a relationship built on deception and betrayal can ever really be happy. But mostly, I don't think about them at all anymore.
I'm focusing on rebuilding my life, on figuring out who I am when I'm not half of a couple that never really existed in the first place. It's harder than I expected, but it's also liberating. For the first time in years, I don't have to second guess my instincts or ignore red flags or convince myself that love means accepting lies. Sometimes people ask me if I regret looking at his phone that night, if I wish I'd stayed ignorant and enjoyed my honeymoon bliss a little longer. The answer is always no. The truth hurt, but living a lie would have hurt worse. And now, when I do find love again, I'll know what real love looks like. It looks like transparency, like respect, like someone who's proud to be with you instead of someone who treats you like a secret to be hidden. The anonymous texter was right about one thing. I did deserve to know the truth. And now that I do, I'm finally free to find something real. 2 years have passed from that devastating night, and I can honestly say my life is unrecognizable in the best way possible. I moved across the country to Portland, Oregon, where I knew absolutely no one. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. I wanted to start fresh somewhere that held no memories of Marcus, no reminders of the woman I used to be when I was living someone else's version of my life. I found a small studio apartment in the arts district and threw myself into pottery classes, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was planning a wedding that turned out to be a sham. There's something deeply therapeutic about working with clay, about creating something beautiful with your hands while your mind processes everything you've been through. My instructor, Helen, is a 70-year-old woman who has been divorced 3 times and has no patience for self-pity. Heartbreak is just fertilizer for growth, she told me during one of our sessions when I was particularly frustrated with a bowl that kept collapsing. The question is what you're going to grow from it. I started small. Coffee mugs, simple bowls, nothing too ambitious. But gradually, my pieces became more complex, more confident. I was learning to trust my hands, to trust my instincts, to trust myself again. It's amazing how betrayal can make you doubt everything about your judgment. But slowly, through clay and fire and countless failed attempts, I was rebuilding my confidence, one piece at a time. My social life began organically through the pottery studio. There's a group of us who go out for drinks after Thursday night classes, and for the first time in years, I was making friends as just myself, not as Marcus's girlfriend or fiance or wife. These people knew nothing about my past except what I chose to share, and it was incredibly freeing to be seen as Natalie the potter, Natalie the friend, Natalie the woman who laughs too loud at her own jokes. 6 months ago, I met Daniel at a coffee shop near my apartment. He was reading a book I'd mentioned loving in my online dating profile, and when he looked up and smiled, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before I discovered those messages. Genuine attraction without fear. We've been taking things incredibly slowly, and he's been patient with my need for transparency about everything. He shows me his phone freely, includes me in his social media posts, introduces me to his friends and family without hesitation. The difference is night and day. With Marcus, I realize now there were always small barriers, tiny walls I couldn't quite identify, but somehow sensed. With Daniel, everything feels open and honest and straightforward. He tells me about his day without editing, shares his thoughts and feelings without reservation, and most importantly, he makes me feel like being with me is a privilege, not a burden. Last week, I received a wedding invitation in the mail that made me smile instead of cry. My college roommate, Rebecca, is getting married, and she specifically asked me to bring a +1 because she wants to meet the man who brought back the sparkle in my eyes. I'm planning to bring Daniel, and for the first time since my own disastrous wedding day, I'm actually looking forward to celebrating someone else's love story. I keep the screenshots from Marcus's phone saved in a folder on my computer, not because I want to torture myself, but because they serve as a reminder of what I will never accept again. Sometimes when I'm having a good day, a day when I feel completely healed and whole, I'll read them just to remember how far I've come. The woman who discovered those messages was devastated and broken. The woman I am now is stronger, wiser, and infinitely more selective about who deserves access to her heart. Marcus tried to reach out a few months after our divorce was finalized. He sent a long email about how sorry he was, how he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, how Veronica had turned out to be nothing like he thought he was. I read it once, felt absolutely nothing, and deleted it. That felt like the final closure I needed, the moment that my former husband became just someone I used to know. The anonymous person who texted me that night gave me the greatest gift imaginable, the truth. It hurt tremendously at the time, but it also freed me from a life built on deception. I'll never know who they were or what motivated them to reach out, but I hope they know that their courage to speak up changed my entire trajectory for the better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.